Hello everyone. So tonight I'll be reading out a ghost story from the East Riding again. It's called Beverley and Hull Ghosts from the Civil War and Revolution. On the 23rd of June 1642, King Charles I, at the head of 300 cavalrymen, stood outside the gates of Hull and demanded they be opened for him. On the walls above stood Sir John Howe, appointed governor of the city by Parliament, after falling to his knees to profess his loyalty to the king, and with many apologies, Sir John refused to open the gates. The king at first could not understand how one of his subjects could disobey him, and ordered the soldiers who were standing beside Sir John to throw him over the walls and into the ditch. But they too disobeyed their king. With curses and threats, Charles turned away from the city and led his force back to Beverley. This act of defiance from Sir John Howe was the spark which started the first English Civil War. Hull and Beverley became for a time the cockpit of the war. Hull was besieged, and the fighting was so vicious that soon the wardens at Holy Trinity Church were complaining that they had run out of places to bury the dead. With all this fighting, it is not surprising that the odd cavalier or Roundhead's ghost is still to be found wandering around. Perhaps the saddest ghost is that of Sir John Howe himself. He should have been one of the heroes of the war, but having repulsed the king, he started to bargain with him secretly, offering to hand over the city and its powerful armoury in return for an earldom. His secret was discovered, and Sir John tried to flee. Unfortunately, as he passed through the marketplace in Beverley, he was recognised, and though he tried to escape up a side alley, was knocked from his horse with a musket and arrested. Sir John was beheaded in the Tower of London, but his ghost still haunts a little lane by the marketplace in Beverley. The clattering of his horse's hoofs still to be heard, followed by the noise of a vicious struggle, screams and curses, then a deep, profound silence. Other gruesome ghosts include those of soldiers terribly wounded during skirmishes around the city and unable to move when the banks of the Humber were broken down to flood the surrounding countryside and hamper the besiegers. Their terrible drowning gasps and skeletal hands sometimes emerged from dips and hollows in the fields to chill the heart and grasp the ankles of the people who passed by. The Hessel Gate was visited one evening by the devil himself, who was obviously on King Charles' side, for he carried off the sentry and caused such terror that the gate was bricked off and never used again. Eventually, after many bloody battles, the siege was raised and Charles' forces retreated to York. The fortifications which the people of Hull had built for defence were still useful, however. One was used as a small prison. Unfortunately, it was not fully secure, and one inmate, Harry Ogle, managed to squeeze through a little window and escape. But in doing so, he injured his throat and bled to death. As he ran down to the river, Harry Ogle's bloody ghost, Hull's own bogeyman, was said to stalk children until the last remains of Harry Ogle's tower were pulled down in the mid-19th century. The war gradually moved away from Hull, and when Charles I was executed, the people wisely sent a petition to Cromwell congratulating him on his success and reminding them of their steadfast loyalty during the conflict. And when Charles I's son, Charles II, was restored to the throne, they wisely sent him a petition congratulating him on his success, saying that the shameful spectacle of his royal father being refused admission to the town could never have happened had the inhabitants been in charge of the garrison, and had not, by an armed power, been forced from that point of obedience to which their affections naturally tended. Once they had tried living under the Stuarts, they got a little tired of them and invited William of Orange over from Holland to see if he could do a better job. His arrival was much less violent than the coming of Charles I, but still produced its own crop of ghosts. An army comprising foreign mercenaries was brought to England through Hull, and 2 Danish soldiers fell to arguing as they passed through Beverley. They fought a duel near the racecourse, and one of them was killed. The other was arrested, and after a court-martial, condemned to die. Danish law demanded that murderers should have their heads cut off. So the unfortunate fellow was marched to the marketplace behind his own coffin, and amidst great ceremony beheaded. This incident is recorded on a plaque on the wall of St. Mary's Church, which reads, "Here 2 young Danish soldiers lie. The one in quarrel chanced to die. The other's head, by their own law, with sword was fevered at one blow." December the 25th, 1689. But his death is more vividly recalled by customers of the Green Dragon pub, who claim after drinking copious quantities of ale to have seen the headless figure of the soldier blundering blindly through the gentleman's toilet. Back in Hull, the grateful people had a statue of William of Orange, triumphantly riding a horse, erected in the marketplace. It was later moved and stands today looking over one of the finest examples of Victorian toilets, which the Cadman storytellers have had the honour of visiting. The sculptor unfortunately, forgot to give King Billy stirrups for his feet. This oversight was so strongly criticised locally that the artist, after writing a suicide note defending his sculpture, apparently the king was being portrayed in the form of a triumphal Roman emperor who would not have used stirrups, blew his brains out with a pistol. Not having his feet encumbered with stirrups has proved advantageous to the king, however, for occasionally, is said, Holy Trinity Church clock strikes 13 times, and King Billy's slips easily from his horse's back and into a local alehouse for a pot of beer. The cabman storytellers, mindful of the onerous duties associated with their chosen profession, have visited and supped in all of the pubs where William of Orange might possibly have visited. But despite our extensive inquiries, I've never found anyone who claimed to have seen the 8-foot bronze statue drinking at the bar. This is not 100% true. We might more accurately write that we never met anyone on whose testimony we felt we could rely who claimed to have seen the 8-foot bronze statue drinking in the bar. And that's that. I'm sorry it's one of these weird stories again. It's weirded very strangely. So I'm not sure about this one. The way it's worded, I don't know how it's going to turn out, people, so I'm sorry for that. I should have done a different one. Right, so we'll have a go at another one. The Fairies of Willey, Howe. It is many years now since the alehouse in Foxholes shut the door on its last customers. The hardy Walls farmers who used to gather there in the evenings, few even of the oldest people can remember the tale of the night when old Ebenezer, a farmer labourer with a reputation for drinking, crashed through the door and stopped unsteady on his feet, his eyes wild and staring. "Is he drunk again?" asked one of the sturdy farmers by the bar, rolling his eyes at his companions as they looked at old Abe, swaying where he stood. "What ails you?" asked one of the other men. "You look as if you'd seen a ghost." "No ghost," said Ebenezer. "Fairies." The farmer stared at him, thinking it was some sort of joke. Ebenezer did not smile, however, but said, "Beer, give me a drink," and lowered himself shakily onto a bench. The sturdy farmer looked at his friends and winked. "Fairies, Ebenezer. Were they dancing round a toadstool, perhaps?" At this, the farmers all burst into laughter. Laugh if you want," shouted Ebenezer, shaking his fist at them. "But you wouldn't laugh if you'd been through what I've been through." The vicar was sitting quietly in the corner, nursing a small pot of ale. "So you say you've seen fairies, Ebenezer? Tell us more." The jeering crowd fell silent in respect for the vicar, and Ebenezer began to speak. "It was over by Willey, Howe it happened, not an hour ago. Now I don't like to go past the place after dark. I've heard too many ghost stories and such like. But I've been ploughing at Burton till late, and it's a long way round if you go by Thwing. So I say, come on, Jess, old horse, we'll take the short way. Now we were just passing the mound when I heard the noise. It was like a great crowd at the fair, but I couldn't see anything, and I wondered why so many people would be over by Willey, Howe, on a dark winter's night. So I got off old Jess and clambered over the edge and went over to where I heard the noise. There was no one to be seen, but as I got closer, the noise got louder. It was then I saw it, a great oak door set in the side of the hill that had never been there before, and under it you could see a light shining, a great light like there was 100 candles burning, and that is where the noise came from. Well, I'm no fool. I played by Willey Howe when I was a boy, and I knew there shouldn't be a door there, so it must be a fairy door. My father told me there were fairies in the hill. Why, his grandfather could remember a time when one of them used to come out and sit on the top and play his fiddle on a night, and any bairn that went up, drawn by the music, would disappear, taken off by the fairies forever. Well, I didn't want to meet those fairies, but I've never seen one, and you'd want to peep, wouldn't you? So I creeps to the door and look through the keyhole. But you see, there's a key in it on the other side, and I can't see a thing. And all the time I can hear them fairies laughing and singing, and I can smell food, lovely food, and think they're so busy eating and drinking and shouting at each other, they'll never notice if I push the door open a little and peer through the crack. So I turn the handle ever so slow, stopping and listening to make sure none of them have noticed. Then push the door ever so slow, ever so careful. When creak, the door flies open all the way. It was a fairy that opened it, waiting behind the door all the time. It was waiting for me to push the door, and suddenly all the noise stopped, and all the fairies sitting at their banqueting table were looking at me. Well, the little fellow behind the door holds out his hand and says, "Come in. You're welcome." I should have run then, but you know, I didn't want to be rude, and besides, I could see the food on the tables. Juicy great chickens and tates as big as your head. So I was tempted. Well, they made a space for me, sat me down on a lovely great throne, and put a plate out for me. Meat, they say, gravy, and they pour a great dollop of gravy over the best loin chop I ever saw. "Drink," says one, and hands me a cup of wine. Then I remembered what my dad told me about them fairies, and I think, Ebenezer, if you drink that wine, they'll have a spell on you, and you'll never get out the door. So quick as a flash, I snatched the cup and poured the wine on the floor. Oh, what a change there was in them. Then before, they were all smiles and sitting down. "You're welcome, and will you have another pie?" But after they're all snarling, howling, trying to grab me. Well, I might not be a young man anymore, but I doubt the finest athlete in England has run as fast as I did then. I was out through the door before they could lock it, and through the field, with them chasing after me, and over the hedge with one jump. And why I jumped so high, I landed on my old horse's back, and off she galloped, with 100 fairies running along behind, howling and cursing, like only fairies can. Fairies cursing, shouted one of the farmers, unable to keep quiet a second longer. You are drunk, man. You have lost your senses. The vicar stood up and waved his hand to quieten the crowd, which was now murmuring and chuckling. Turning to Ebenezer, he asked, was the cup made of green gold? Ebenezer's mouth opened and shut, but no words came out. And did it make a sweet ringing noise whenever it touched anything? Ebenezer's eyes bulged. How did you know? He stuttered. Have you seen the fairies too? Now the sturdy farmer burst into gales of mirth, and even the vicar could not help but smile. Well, he said, I do find your story interesting, as it shows that your ancestors came from Denmark. The burly farmers looked at the vicar puzzled, wondering if he had turned as mad as Ebenezer. Yes, said the vicar, turning to the farmers and addressing them like he did the Sunday school. The Vikings colonized this part of Yorkshire, and you're all descendants of that hardy, warlike race. The farmers' chests swelled with pride. Their ginger sideburns glittered in the candlelight. And naturally, the customs and traditional beliefs are related. It is very interesting that around the Danish town of Kalundborg, the same story is told, how the hero is tempted by the fairies, and only just escapes with his life, bearing off a musical green gold fairy cup, which, even though encrusted in jewels, proves to be worthless when he tries to sell it. Imagine the same childish tale which Ebenezer here has entertained us with, was brought to this country by your Viking ancestors, and has been passed down through the generations for almost 1,000 years. Childish tale, shouted Ebenezer, shaking his fist at the vicar. It's true, you fool. The landlord, angry at the disrespect shown to the vicar, looked at Ebenezer sternly and pointed at the door. Out now, he shouted. For a second Ebenezer looked as if he was going to argue, but looking around at the many disapproving faces, muttered an apology and stepped out into the night. The landlord poured a jug of ale and took it to the vicar. I'm very sorry about that. I suspect he'd been drinking at the anvil before he came here. It's a notorious haunt for drunkards, that place. That's quite all right, said the vicar. I was more amused than offended. He's a funny one, though, smiled the landlord, with his fairies under the hill. And then feeding him pork chops, laughed one of the burly farmers, which set off a gale of laughter amongst his companions. The faint sound of laughter drifted through the night air and into Ebenezer's ears as his horse plodded steadily homewards along the road. Childish tale, said Ebenezer, shaking his head. There must be fairies here and Denmark, and I thought it'd be worth a bob or two, he muttered bitterly, as he reached into his saddle bag to pull out the finely crafted jewel encrusted cup. Turning slightly, he threw the cup back down the road towards the alehouse, and the sound of the laughter mocking farmers as it spun through the air. It glittered strangely green in the moonlight, then landing on the ground with a beautiful tinkling sound. Slowly and musically it rolled to the side of the road, then plopped into the ditch, sinking silently under the deep muddy water. Them damn fairies and their worthless green cups. Right, okay, everyone. These two stories are worded very, very strangely for some reason. Very difficult to read these out, the way that it's worded. But that's from both from East Riding again. So I'm not sure about this. And yeah, I was ill for 2 days with a stomach bug. I'm still not. I'm better than I was, but I'm still not right. And I thought I'd try these stories out, but the way that the word is very, very weird and difficult to read out. So I'm just hoping for the best when I listen to it again. And if it's rubbish, I'll take it down. Yes, it's just a shame I didn't pick something else, but just the way it goes. So yeah, so that's it for tonight, and we'll see how this works. Yeah. So thank you everyone, and I'll be on again soon. Thank you for listening.